move on and wrap up with Aston Villa. Pete, talking of FFP, PSR, that unofficial transfer deadline day window of June the 30th. If overspending is being charged with 4 points, do you think Villa actually going into that period, are they looking at selling players potentially? Because we know, of course, they have been quite tight in terms of FFP.
Yeah, they're on the fringes of it. Real worrying financial figures that Villa did release for their accounts for 2022-23. I think losses of 119.6 million. That's over the threshold of 105 over 3 years straight away. So they claim they're continuing to operate within the Premier League's profit and sustainability rules. But yeah, real worrying figures, those from Aston Villa that they've recorded in that one. And obviously there was a few rumours in the January transfer window that they might have to cash in on some of their homegrown players, the likes of Jacob Ramsey, who's a top player just on the fringes of that England squad for me, that they might have to cash in on him. I'm sure there'll be more talk that he could potentially have to be sold in the summer transfer window as well. And there will be a number of clubs watching that situation, especially coming up to that June 30th deadline when Villa will have to announce their new accounts for 2023-24. So I think for Villa right now, they got away with it probably over the last couple of years when they sold Jack Grealish to Manchester City for £100 million. That obviously helped in their accounting period for the last couple of years as well. But I think you saw last summer what they had to do. They had to sell some homegrown players, which maybe they didn't really want to, but to help balance the books, they sold Cameron Archer to Sheffield United. Jadon Philogene went to Hull City, and also Aaron Ramsey ended up going to Burnley. So that was 3 players from the Villa Academy, all sold for pure profit. And the fear for Villa right now is, after recording those big losses, that Jacob Ramsey might be the next one to have to go. But on the flip side for Villa, they'll be desperate to get into that Champions League for next season, because that'll obviously boost revenues as well. And that would come as a big bonus to Unai Emery, who, again, obviously a very ambitious manager. He'll be hoping that Villa will be busy in this summer transfer window as well to try and improve the squad.
Pete, will that be the catalyst? Will Champions League be the difference between players staying and players leaving, do you think?
I don't think it'll be the difference. They'll have to balance the books, whatever. But obviously, £40 million guaranteed getting into the group stages of the Champions League, which will be huge to Villa. But if you look at it on the flip side, once you get into that Champions League, players' wages go up, players' price tags go up for players that you want to try and sign as well, because clubs know you're in the Champions League. So it's a difficult one to get that balance right, and that's what Aston Villa need to do right now, because recording losses of 120 million in a year is not sustainable. As much as the Villa owners are very wealthy and very ambitious as well, they'll find themselves facing PSR breaches if they continue to have results like that.
And what this year's financial results will carry as well. I mean, you looking at the squad, Watkins, Mings and Konza, all three of them, signed new long-term bumper contracts. So their new wages, Watkins, Mings and Konza, that's 3 long-term contracts on big money. So this year's financial statement's going to have to show that. I mean, they whether they sell or whether they buy players, it's not just the trading of players, it's the wage bill as well. So those 3 players on new contracts will come into play. And the worrying thing from a Villa point of view is if they don't get Champions League, you look at the likes of Ollie Watkins and Douglas Luiz, who's been outstanding this year. We know that Arsenal are looking at Douglas Luiz and Jacob Ramsey. I mean, if Villa were in a situation that they had to balance the books, and Villa fans won't like to hear it, but Jacob Ramsey and Douglas Luiz bring you 100 million between them at least straight away. And there's your book balanced.
That must be, I mean, Pete, if we come back right to the beginning of the conversation in terms of Forest, you said in their teams coming up can't compete, and that's a struggle. But do you feel for fans as well that start to compete? Of course, we've seen Villa probably their best season in a number of years. They've done absolutely brilliantly. They are pushing for top 4, maybe top 6, depending on where that run-in ends up. Do you feel disappointed that actually your dreams aren't crushed necessarily, but you're on the brink of success, and actually it turns out that you have to sell because of FFP PSR rules?
Yeah, it's difficult to compete. All the established clubs in the Premier League, we've always had, it was the top 4 initially, and now we've got a big 6, and now everything else. It's harder and harder to break into that, especially for clubs coming up from the Championship. Look, the table doesn't lie. The 3 clubs that came up last season, although not massive clubs, they found themselves in the relegation zone. And I think it's going to be a similar story probably come next season when the 3 teams that come up from the Championship this year although Leeds looking like they could be in there, they would love to compete at the top end of the table, but I think it's going to be hard for them even to try and stay up in the Premier League next season as well, unless they spend money. But then if you do spend money and show ambition, you run the risk of potentially breaching those PSR rules and everything else. So it's a vicious circle. You want to be ambitious and you want to compete, but then you could put your club in jeopardy and you could end up breaching these financial rules as well. And then you get points deductions as well. So yeah, I feel for the fans, like Paul mentioned, I think at the start of the show, that it's the fans that sort of get the rough edge of it, really, because there's nothing better than your team winning promotion or whatever else when then you come into the Premier League and you just can't compete at all. And I think you can see
that's going to be Leicester next year, isn't it? I mean, if Leicester come up like it looks like they are going to do, they could come up, have the ecstasy of coming up and then start the Premier League on -6 points because of their FFP situation.
And that's it's a massive disappointment, isn't it? Paul, what about going forwards? You know, you mentioned the independent regulator occasionally. What do you think about that? Is that the solution? Is it viable? Because there's been massive backlash, I think, from both owners and fans alike about this new independent regulator that's going to step in.
Well, I think that you got to look at it now. Football clubs voted for these rules. They voted for these sanctions and they were passed by football clubs voting for them. And they're the ones now that are kicking and screaming against them, which, listen, I understand it. I don't like them. What the answer is, you know, that's, again, that's way above our pay grade to decide what the answer is. Has there to be some kind of sanctions? Yeah, I think there's got to be some kind of sanctions because you can't allow clubs to go to the wall. I mean, you look at the likes of Bury in the Football League. You know, you look at others, worrying signs at certain football clubs. Yet these sanctions are brought in for that. But at the same time, don't quash the Premier League. Don't quash people wanting to come and invest money into our fantastic league because we've got the best product in the world. People want to be involved with the best product in the world, and the richest people want to be involved with the best product in the world. Don't stop them coming into our game and spending money and making clubs better, because clubs have been doing it for years to get to the level they've got at. You look at the like you say there, the big six, whatever they are. We don't have to name the clubs. Look at the stadiums, look at their training grounds, look at the infrastructure, look at the players that have been through, look at the trophies that go with it. How is anyone going to get closer to them if you're not going to allow teams to spend to a level what they have over years? There's got to be some kind of regulation brought in, yes, that governs football, that looks after it, whether an independent regulator or not. I'm not sure I'm in agreement to that. I'd like the Premier League to get their own shop in order, but seemingly that's a struggle at the moment. But I just think you can't stop teams from wanting to grow. You can't stop people with money wanting to invest in business and grow their business by putting financial caps on it, because the gap, we talk about this European Super League, and that is a can that's just getting kicked down the road. But people can't actually see it's happening. It's happening right under your nose. Every single year, the Champions League gets bigger. The Champions League was in place because it was the champions of every country playing against each other, the best of the best. And you only get that now in the last 16. The group stage of the Champions League is becoming like the group stages of the Euros or the World Cup. You know, that you know which two are going to qualify from the group. So now this season, because of the coefficiency, we potentially could have 5 teams in the Champions League. That's a quarter of our Premier League. So a quarter of the Premier League could be in the Champions League. So if you don't think that European Super League's happening, have a look at that. And these financial rules allow the big to get bigger and the rich to get richer, and nobody else can close the gap.
You've just watched a segment from Football Insider's brand new podcast, The Inside Track, with me, Lewis Pearce, alongside the guests on the show. Thanks very much for tuning in. Please do give the video a like, comment your thoughts on the topic, and feel free to share on your social media pages. If you want to listen to the full podcast episode, click the link in the description below. Keep your eyes peeled for plenty more content and exclusives here on The Inside Track.